to another episode of the Armchair Crew Chief. My name is Jordan, and thank you guys for listening along. We are about to enter into July, one more race in June, and then we bump into the second half of 2024. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Last week they were out at New Hampshire, and we had some interesting ideas that popped up for Saturday and for Sunday. And Saturday, let's just dive right into the qualifying with our top five. Sheldon Creed at 5th, Riley Herbst 4th, Sam Mayer, Chandler Smith, and our pole winner was Cole Custer. And going into stage 1, top 10 was Justin Bonsignor, Jeb Burton, Ryan Sieg, Carson Quaffle, Alex Bowman, Justin Allgaier, AJ Allmendinger, Riley Herbst, Sammy Smith, and Sam Mayer. Going into stage 2, we had Parker Kligerman in 10th, Austin Hill, Brandon Jones, Corey Heim, Justin Allgaier, Chandler Smith, Sheldon Creed, Cole Custer, Justin Bonsignor, and Christopher Bell sitting there at first at the end of stage 2. And just seeing how this race played out, ended up going, last lap pass to win the race with two people sitting there fighting for it. And my goodness, poor Sheldon Creed still can't buy a win. It's rough for him. It's just rough watching him too, because he sits there and he's so stinking close. Either he finishes in the top 5, or he's running really well and something might happen to him, similar to what happened to Allgaier back at Phoenix. But man, it's just one of those things that it's like he runs well and then something happens to the car, or he runs well and there's a late caution that happens. So running through the cautions that happen in this race, we had a competition caution because we got rained out for qualifying. Patrick Emmerling got a caution. We had a total of 11 cautions, including our competition caution, our incident plus, and then we had stage 1, stage 2 in. Stage 2 was really clean. No cautions showed up there. And then we have a slew of cautions towards the end of the race. Starting off with stage 2 start, we have one person, Armani Williams, spins twice, turn 4 and in the backstretch, to cause an issue. Chandler Smith got into it. Sam Mayer, Sammy Smith, Brandon Jones, Allmendinger, Bowman, Justin Bonsignor. I know I've been butchering his name. Austin Hill, Brennan Poole, Kyle Weatherman, and SVG all got into it in turn 2. Haley Deegan and Nathan Bird got into it in turn 4. And then our last caution was Mason Massey, Haley Deegan, Blaine Perkins, Ryan Ellis got into it in turn 2. With that being said, our finish to the race started off with Corey Heim 10th, Alex Bowman, Riley Herbst, Parker Kligerman, Ryan Sieg, Carson Quaffle. Another strong running for this guy. Coming in, not running a full-time Xfinity schedule, getting into the 88. And, he showed that he can run with the big boys. And I know he's in Junior Motorsports equipment, and that helps him a lot. But he can run with them, and that's awesome to see. Justin Allgaier 4th, Cole Custer 3rd. Again, as we talked about, Sheldon Creed 2nd. I'd like to see the stats on how many second-place finishes he's gotten. And then Christopher Bell, he made the last lap pass when Sheldon Creed and Cole Custer were getting into each other to take the lead to win. He did lead 43 laps throughout the race. Cole Custer was pretty much the dominant person, running 114 laps. And that just puts it in there on, he probably could have won the race if it wasn't for the bumping. I don't know. Creed, as I was saying, it stinks for Creed because he kind of just falls off and goes from there. So looking at the playoff picture for the Xfinity race, Xfinity, our cutoff, we have Sammy Smith 31 points above the cutoff line. And then below you have the likes of Ryan Sieg, Anthony Alfredo, Brandon Jones, Brennan Poole, Parker Retzlaff. So the rest of our top 10 for playoffs, we have Chandler Smith, Austin Hill, Sam Mayer, SVG, all with 2 wins. Then you have Allgaier, Jesse Love finishing off the wins. And then making it on points right now, we have Custer, Creed, Hurst, Allmendinger, Kligerman, and then, as we mentioned, Sammy Smith. So it's going to be interesting to see. We're only looking about 31 points, as I was saying, between the cutoff line, and then 40 more points to Anthony Alfredo. So I think it's going to probably come down to the Sammy Smith, Ryan Sieg, unless something big happens, to see what happens. Regular season points, we're looking at Cole Custer sitting there with the 15-point lead over Chandler Smith, and then 42 from Allgaier. So I think it's going to be another one of those things that's going to be an interesting race to see what happens between the two, who wins the Xfinity regular season championship versus what's going on. So that's something to keep your eye on when we're moving up, going into Nashville. So running into Cup Series, qualifying was rained out for Cup Series. Did not run. Sorry, did not run. So qualifying was based on points, and we had a culmination of points and so on. Their metric that changes. It seems to change all the time. Same principles, different percentages. So top 10: Josh Berry, Brad Keselowski, Ross Chastain, Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, Christopher Bell, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott. And running it through stage 1, we had top 5 were Josh Berry, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, and Christopher Bell. Into stage 2, Ryan Blaney 5th, Christopher Bell 4th, Joey Logano 3rd, Martin Truex Jr., and Denny Hamlin. Christopher Bell had a really strong car. Blaney was up there. Blaney's been up there a lot. He's been running pretty well, and it's just one of those things that I don't know if it's because of just the different people he's on, or if he just can't close, or if the equipment's just rough. I don't know. It's not like Martin Truex Jr. where you can sit there and his team ruins his day for him, and because they couldn't get the lug on or something to that effect, and they delayed it, and then he later on got hit by Keselowski and spun, but he did come back and finish pretty respectable, and that's one of those things that I think if his team can get out of his way, we'll see what happens. The big question that came up with this race was rain. So I've talked about in the past where this track we've had Kyle Busch and Truex out there. It's raining. They're calling rain. NASCAR doesn't call it. Truex and Busch spin out. This is the famous Busch hits the pace car because of his frustrations, rightfully so in my opinion. Where they did not bring a wiper blade, did not bring mud flaps or whatever you want to call them. They did bring a defogger and I believe a light. I can't remember that part, but they allow it to run wet weather tires. So we get rain. It's delayed. They're sitting there cleaning the track, like almost dry in areas, and then said you're going to run wet weather tires. Now, yes, the track was moist, but they cleaned off so much water off this track that when the drivers were going around for their warm-up laps, they had to go down into, almost hit the wall on the inside. It separates pit road from the racing surface because of that's where standing water was. So NASCAR did run on this. NASCAR did run in wet weather. I think it was awesome. I think a lot of people liked it. There were some questions that I had, like, why can't we just sit there and change out tires if needed? They left the people on tires. So if you blistered your tires in the first however many laps, it was almost a too bad for you. Same thing. I believe it was Denny Hamlin that was bringing up the question of non-competition pit stops. I'll just refill and put tires on for fuel. And it was a fuel mileage race getting to that point. And he had mentioned, he's like, hey, I know I'm good. And there were a couple of people that, like Reddick, when they talked to him at the red flag for the rain, he's like, I don't know if I'm good or not for fuel. So that came up, and I think that frustrated a lot of people. NASCAR needs to go back to the table and rework this one. And hopefully they work in a positive going out, because I think people liked watching this wet weather racing. Yeah, we did have some spin. LaJoie spun by himself. Kyle Busch broke something. I think he hit the paint on the lower on the line whenever he accelerated. Spun the car, drove it, hit the wall. He was done. So there were some, question marks things. I think it was problem was they dried the track too well, like they were trying to dry it completely for racing, and they probably should have left some dampness on the track. Maybe not run so much of the jet dryers, and maybe run a couple passes the air tightens to get a lot of the standing water off. But once these guys hit the lines, the marked painted on lines, they were spinning if they were throttling, and we saw it a few times. It was interesting. It was fun to watch, though. I will say it was fun to watch this and how everything played out with this race and the wet weatherness. I think they have room to improve for sure. And let's see if they can play it out. I mean, I don't know what else to say besides I think we're moving in a positive direction with the wet weather tire. I think there's a lot more to move through with it, and we can see how NASCAR handles it, because ultimately it's going to be how do they handle it next time this pops up. That's the problem, and the question that comes up is how is this going to be handled. So, looking at that, we did have about 14 incidences with stage 1 ending and stage 2 ending, so you take those out. Had 12 incidences for caution. Stage 1 was fairly clean. Then we had Hemrick spin, Busch and Gragson got into it into stage 2. Chase Elliott, Logano got into it. LaJoie, backstretch. Truex and Brad Keselowski. This is the one I was talking about. So Truex had a really strong car. He was up there. He was one of the faster ones. I don't know if he would have won the race, but he was trending upward. We'll put it that way. And then his team just screws him up on this. He can't go any further, or he gets mired in the backstretch, not go any further, but he can't get up higher and get a better spot after the pit. And then he gets into it with Keselowski. Because from what I heard, Keselowski ran right into him. I did not see this incident, but Keselowski bumped into him, messed him up. Then you have Kyle Busch on the backstretch a couple times. LaJoie spun. Chastain and Haley got into it. LaJoie. Then Carson Hocevar got into it. So I saw he was just loose. And I think what happened was, like as I was telling you, when these guys were hitting the paint, Blaney got into it with McDowell and Haley. They were running up there. I remember seeing it, but I can't fully recall what happened on that one. And Keselowski spun turn 2. So with that being said, going into our race, and this was one of those that these guys were getting out front and running. If they took the lead, and I believe it was the outside, they run the outsides because some of these. It was crazy to watch the handling on this race and how some of these guys could turn, some of these guys couldn't turn. So you'd see they had the straightaway speed, but they couldn't get the roll off, the turnaround in turns to make it tighter to run away with it, which I think was great because you had your levelness and different advantages between the drivers. But our top 10 finishing this race: Ross Chastain 10th, Martin Truex Jr. 9th, John Hunter Nemechek 8th, Ricky Stenhouse, he was getting a little frustrated with some stuff going on, his spotter, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, Kyle Larson, Josh Berry, Chase Briscoe 2nd, and Christopher Bell 1st. So Seabell came back. Briscoe was running it. And Christopher Bell, like I was talking about, he had one of the faster cars and could turn it. He almost had that perfect combination and just get away with it, but he still didn't have as great as straightaway speed, but he was able to turn it. And overall, I think this was a great race. He led Christopher Bell led 148 of 305 laps. So he pretty much dominated this weekend, if you want to put it that way. Not to the effect that he ran away with the race, but he was able to put his car in the position it needed to be in at the right time. Martin Truex Jr. mired in the back with a poor pit stop. Had to fight with Keselowski taking him out. He fought his way all the way up back to ninth. So he ended up really well. And you look at some of these guys towards the back, accidents. Dillon, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, Alex Bowman out for accidents. And then the other guys running in the back just, because of incidences. So it's one of those things to see how everything played out. And I enjoyed the end of the race. I think it was great. Heavy rain come out and run a wet weather tire. I think NASCAR needs to come up with a better idea on how to handle the tire. Maybe not dry the track as much. And I think it might play out better because the track was drying. And then you're telling people you're not allowed to get off wet weather tires. You have to stay on them. But the track's drying up. You're starting to blister, and it just starts hurting people. And I don't know if that's what they were looking for or not. I think, like, as I said, we're moving in the right direction, and we'll see how it plays out from there. So moving along to our points standings for Cup Series. Our first person that does not have a win is number 11 on the 16 that go in, and that is Truex, who is 48 points below the leader for the regular season. And then we have Chastain, Ty Gibbs, Alex Bowman, Chris Buescher, Joey Logano sitting below the cutoff line, and we're talking 13 points roughly, if I'm looking at this right. Bubba Wallace. Then you have Briscoe, Kyle Busch, Ty Gillen. This has not been Kyle Busch's year. There's been rumors that he might be trying to get out of RCR. I don't know. But we're moving into race 19 of the regular season for the Cup Series, and we'll see how everything plays out and runs through there. Other news, if you've been wondering where Eric Almirola's been, apparently he got into it with Bubba Wallace in a driver meeting at Joe Gibbs, so he was indefinitely suspended. I was hearing something that he might be coming back soon off of the suspension that he had. This was an internal suspension. This was not a NASCAR suspension, so Joe Gibbs suspended him. And Bubba Wallace and Eric Almirola do have history, so this is nothing new. This is nothing, crazy. You get those, we see how Eric Almirola works, but we've seen how Bubba Wallace works. Who knows, Eric might be one of these guys that has similar tendencies to like how Bubba acts, and his is just hidden a little bit more. Bubba lets his go out more. I don't know. So moving from there, we did have a confirmed driver change. Well, we knew about Martin Truex Jr. retiring full-time. Chase Briscoe last Friday was announced on accident by Christopher Bell that he's going to be running the 19 next year, and they made it official on Tuesday. So we have Chase Briscoe replacing Truex at Joe Gibbs running the 19. He's going to keep the sponsorship of Bass Pro Shop. And then you have Michael McDowell, who's going to be moving from Front Row Motorsports over to Spire to drive the 71. The rumor changes that we have are, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, and Ryan Preece are looking for new rides. And then, we have one. There was 3 charters being sold. One charter now is being held by Gene Haas to have a Haas team, or I can't remember Haas factory team. And then, who's going to drive that? We don't know yet. And then you move into the other 2 charters. One charter sold to Front Row, so we have another charter available. We have Riley Hurst, who is favored to drive a third 2311 car. Harrison Burton seems unlikely to return to Wood Brothers. I don't think that's going to happen. Poor performances. I mean, that car doesn't get good equipment to be up there running top fives, but that's just rough. We're looking for Zane Smith to go back to Trackhouse. He is on loan to Spire Motorsports to run that 71 car. And with Michael McDowell moving in there, Zane Smith's probably going back. SVG is looking for... He made a comment that he would like to run a full-time Cup schedule. I don't know if it's going to happen because they have 4 drivers signed and only 2 charters. So he would either have to run an open car and try to get in every time on qualifying, or, like they did, what Spire did with Trackhouse with Zane Smith, find something like that. Front Row Motorsports is looking for a new driver. They have a charter as well, so they have 2 open seats in their stable. There's also information that Colleague could merge or be sold to Trackhouse on their Cup Series. I think Colleague needs to focus on Xfinity. They do really well Xfinity-wise, but Cup Series is just not playing out right for them, unfortunately. So that's something to keep an eye out. And then we have contract drivers in contract years where they're expected to stay: Cindric, Wallace, Jones, and Suarez. So I don't know. We'll see what happens from there and how it plays out. Again, it's the silly season. We don't know what's going to happen except for what we've been with Briscoe pretty much, and then the new charter going over to Front Row Motorsports, so they have 2 spots. I think Front Row is going to start being more of a contender. They jumped Stuart Haas this year at Ford. Let's see how it happens. See how it plays. I think that part is good, but at the same time, it's tough. Cup Series racing is tough to get people in and new faces if you have a driver that's running really well, or you have somebody like Truex who's respected who can get the job done. It's frustrating to me because in the press conference that they had that announced Chase Briscoe officially, you hear James Small sitting there and Joe Gibbs, we're trying to do our best to win a championship in that 19 now, and kind of going on that. It's like, are you really? Because the gentleman to your side, you're not changing him. I feel bad for Chase Briscoe. James Small, I'm sorry, James, you're not a good crew chief because the changes that you made are not helping. Maybe you can work better with Chase and what he says, but it's not really working out with Truex. And then the team that he's got, oh my goodness, it's like if it's not a poor setup car or not a track that Martin doesn't like or can't drive that well, the team screws up on pit road. Tire, slow, lug nut, things like that. I mean, I think they keep telling people that we're trying to get a championship, but at the same time, Martin's put them in spots to win, and it just they keep hurting themselves. So I know everybody looks at the driver, but this is a team sport, and you got two parts of this 3-headed monster that are, in my opinion, holding him back. Now, don't get me wrong, the driver does have some effect in that being held back some too, but I think the majority of the blame, if you want to call it that, needs to go on to the crew chief and the team. I mean, we saw this with some of these other guys on how Harvick used to do it all the time, but I think Harvick had a little bit more roles to deal with that as well. So, moving on, we are going to Nashville. We have everybody running, the 3 series running. Craftsman Truck's going to be running on Friday, Xfinity Saturday, and then our Cup Series race on Sunday. So let's go ahead and dive into our weekend schedule here for the races this weekend. So starting today, Friday, we have practice at 4:30 Eastern, qualifying 5, and then we have our Rackley Roofing 200 at 8 Eastern. This is all going to be on FS2 with just the race being on the radio at MRN. Moving into Saturday, we have noon practice and 12:30 Eastern qualifying for the Xfinity Series that will be on USA Network. And then moving into Cup Series practice at 2:05 and 2:50 qualifying. So we're only looking at, half an hour to a little less than an hour for practice until we get into quality. We're talking 45 minutes for practice for the Cup Series. USA and PRN will have those broadcasts, with it being simulcast on SiriusXM. Moving over to the Tennessee Lottery 250 at 5 Eastern on USA. SiriusXM will simulcast the PRN broadcast. And then 3:30 Eastern on Sunday the 30th, NBC will be carrying the Ally 400. Ally 400. PRN has the radio broadcast with SiriusXM simulcasting that. We'll see what happens and plays out with all this. I'm not a big fan of Nashville. I think it's one of those tracks that can sit there and be just like a Michigan and Texas, where it gets kind of dull and boring, just the size of the track and how it plays out. So hopefully maybe we have some changes that'll look differently, and we'll see what goes on. I'm trying to figure out who won this race last year. I think it was a Hendrick car, but just to see how everything plays out with what was going on, we have a few races coming up. We have the Chicago Street Race coming up after this. That is on the 7th. So Ross Chastain did win this. So I was incorrect on that. Ross won it last year. Then we move over into the Chicago Street Race, where SVG won that race, the inaugural one. We'll see what happens there. Then we move into Pocono, and then into Brickyard, and that ends our July. So our 3 races in July will be the Chicago Street Race on the 7th. The 14th will be Pocono and Indianapolis on the 21st. And then we bump right into Richmond, Michigan, Daytona. And then we go from there into Darlington. Darlington is our Sunday, September 1st, and then we hit playoffs. So Darlington is the last race of the regular season and how this will play out. And it'll be close to see if maybe Busch doesn't make it into the playoffs. What happens with that if he tries to get out? I saw some rumors that maybe he was trying to get back into Joe Gibbs before Chase Briscoe got announced. I don't know. That one will be one to look at and see how RCR and Kyle Busch handle this poor performance that's been going on with that car, with the 8 car as well. So moving forward, don't forget Ally 400 on Sunday at 3:30. And, thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully soon we'll be running back into a regular podcast back and forth where I'll have Rebecca back. It's been a crazy few weeks and month with baseball with our son, so that's kind of one reason why this kind of been a reduced style podcast. But anyway, you guys have a great weekend, and we will catch you next week. Bye now.